Today, we welcome to Global Citizenship Education Interview Series Yusef Shultz. Yusef is the director of the Japan Intercultural Institute in Tokyo. He's also the host of the Deep Culture podcast sponsored by the Japan Intercultural Institute. He has worked in intercultural education in Japan, Mexico, and Europe for more than 25 years. He is a specially appointed professor at Keio University and is widely published. His books include Language, Culture, and Embodied Mind, Springer, The Intercultural Mind, Connecting Culture, Cognition, and Global Living, Intercultural Press, Identity, Oxford University Press, Deep Culture, The Hidden Challenges of International Living, Multilingual Matters, and Beneath the Surface, The Beginner's Guide to Deep Cultural Experience, Intercultural Press. So, Yusef, it's a pleasure to welcome you here at Global Citizenship Education Interview Series. Thank you for joining.
Oh, very happy to be with you, Emiliano. It's an honor to be part of this series.
So I'm very happy to speak with you, besides the fact that we are both based in Japan, in Tokyo. And my question is a challenging one, at least the first one. And the question is, what is global citizenship education and how would you define a global citizen?
It's great to begin with this question. You know, we had an exchange before the interview, and I mentioned that in some of my work, I've been somewhat skeptical of this idea of global citizenship. And you said that you were welcoming a wide range of opinions. And so it's really fun to talk with you about these topics because it is a difficult question. What is global citizenship education? How would you define a global citizen? I am an enthusiastic skeptic of the idea of global citizenship education. I'm enthusiastic because the idea of global citizenship, as I understand it from the perspective of, say, the UNESCO, the work that UNESCO does, of connecting, that we're connected to a broader global community, that we need to contribute to it positively, that we can influence change for a wide range of issues. I'm very enthusiastic about this ideal. I'm a bit of a skeptic because I tend to think that it's easy to do badly and difficult to do well. And so for that reason, for me, if global citizenship education engages people in the world to be solving problems and to learn things that they didn't know before, then that's wonderful. But I sometimes talk to young people who have had a course or a program or something, and sometimes they have a negative reaction and they say, well, oh, you know, this is what rich white people do. Or, you know,
this
you
is
have
interesting.
Yeah, this is something that, you know, that you feel like you're going to solve the world's problems, when in fact there is no global passport. Nobody is a citizen of the globe. Everyone is local and everything is local.
Yeah.
And so, so again, the goals of the global citizenship are wonderful: to get learners engaged and not turn it into something where it's just a kind of ideology that's easy to agree with but hard to know what to do. Or sometimes I've talked to young people who said, well, you know, the people in power don't care about us, and so, you know, I don't really know what to do. And so you can absorb the wrong lessons as well. The world is full of problems and the problems are so big, and I am so small. So this can be even discouraging sometimes. Enthusiastic skeptic.
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, as you probably know, there is a lot of discussion around the notion of global citizenship, educating for global citizenship education, with a variety of approaches to it. For example, a little bit more neoliberal, so oriented to foster global workers rather than global citizens. And then you have much more critical and transformative decolonial approaches, where the old discussion of connecting the local and the global becomes relevant and very important, because then attached to that discussion, there is all the discussion around Western-centric values and all of that. So when there is the addition of citizenship, it becomes even more interesting, this whole discussion on fostering global citizens and global citizenship. But I want to build on your answer to my first question and ask you, how does your work in intercultural education, which is often connected to this whole discussion on fostering global citizens and global citizenship, how does your work in intercultural education, particularly at the Japan Intercultural Institute, connect to notions of global citizenship?
Well, at the Japan Intercultural Institute, we're a community of educators who are interested in new approaches to intercultural education. We have online workshops. We have a learning circle where we share best practices. We sponsor a podcast, the Deep Culture podcast. And I consider intercultural understanding to be a kind of foundation for global citizenship education. Because the world is a complex place. The answers to problems are not simple. And so we need to have an understanding of the complexity of the world, and also the fact that not everyone agrees on what the problems are, and they certainly don't agree on what the solutions are. So the ability to work across difference, to work with people who have different opinions in a pluralistic world, I think is a foundational skill for anything that we're trying to do on a larger scale of the world. And I think it's important that we're not naive, that we think that because we've understood that global warming is a problem, that then we have the answers. In fact, the problems in the world are complex, and people are complex, and culture is complex. So understanding that complexity, I think, is a very important step. And kind of following up on something you said earlier about the different approaches to global citizenship education. In my work, I make a distinction between activism and education. And for me, there may be some overlap, but for me, there's an important distinction. So activism says, I understand the problem and I want to change it. Education says, I want to understand the problem. So for me, education is the necessary step that is the foundation for any time that you want to make positive change. And I think that because the world is such a complex place, the education side of this, learning about the world, is critical. It's important not to jump to the idea that because we have the right philosophy, we can solve the world's problems. The world's problems are messy and need a lot of hard work.
All right. I think it would be interesting to step back a little bit in terms of the brief history and roots of the center that you are directing, the Japan Intercultural Institute, rather. How it started, what was your initial vision for the institute, and how it developed and how it's going right now? And I'm asking because oftentimes my guests kind of intertwine the responses to their personal life journey. And I believe that you are dedicating a major part of your time to the Institute. So it would be interesting to share a little bit of journey on how you created the center and how it's going.
Well, I'm originally from the United States, but I've lived most of my adult life outside of my home country. So I've lived in Mexico, I lived in Japan for many years, I lived in France for a couple of years. And so I'm very interested in the way that foreign experiences and experiencing the larger world can change us and how we can grow as an individual. And I'm been very influenced by the writing of Edward Hall, who is considered the founder of the field of intercultural communication. And he believed that intercultural understanding is really one of the key challenges of humankind. And particularly now in the 21st century, where we have increased division, that it does not seem to be that the global village is all coming together. In fact, the global village seems to be splitting apart in different camps. So my journey was living in a foreign society, being an educator, as a language educator, as educator for intercultural communication. I see what I do as connected to this larger vision of intercultural understanding around the world. And I started the Japan Intercultural Institute as a way to have a community of educators who shared the vision that Edward Hall has, which is that intercultural understanding is a challenge for mankind or humankind, that intercultural understanding is a very difficult process that we each have to go through as we grapple with cultural difference and understand ourselves more deeply, but that it can lead to great growth and transformation. Everyone, as you know, living in a foreign country, when you live in a foreign country, you have foreign experiences. It changes us. It opens our eyes to new things. So it's this idea of the positive change that can come from intercultural experiences was the vision of the Japan Intercultural Institute. It's been around for 15 years. I mentioned earlier some of our activities. The podcast is a big project that we spend a lot of our energy on, which we produce every month. And
the Deep Culture podcast.
The Deep Culture podcast by the
We will
Japan.
add a link after we publish this video interview so that the audience can access easily.
Yes. And so my work with the Japan Intercultural Institute is a kind of life work that I have, and it is very, as you say, it is very closely related to my personal journey because, well, every time you go to a new place, you discover two new places that you want to know. Every time you learn a new language, you discover new languages. And so the more you know, the less you know. And so it's a kind of lifetime journey to try and understand the diversity in the world. But I do recognize that I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to travel, to live in a foreign country. And I recognize that the number of people in the world who are able to take an airplane is a minority, for example. And so this is
particularly nowadays, currently.
Particularly nowadays. So this is one reason that I sometimes am a little bit skeptical or critical of the notion of global citizenship as a kind of broad ideal, because some people will think that this means you have to travel the world and that you have to go to foreign countries, when of course for most people that's not possible. And I know that not everyone believes that about global citizenship, but I do think it's one of the pitfalls that one of the misunderstandings that's possible.
Absolutely. What will be, if you can share with our audience, 2 or 3 key themes emerged from your very important work at the Institute, so the Japan Intercultural Institute, 2 or 3 major themes that you found particularly relevant on this discussion on intercultural education, global citizenship?
So one of them is deep culture. And deep culture refers to the unconscious ways in which culture shapes our view of the world, that we're not aware of our culture. And this is important because it's easy to have a surface experience. It's easy to watch a YouTube video of a foreign country. It's easy to be a tourist, but to have a deeper understanding of another cultural world, of another country, it takes a lot more work. And it's important for us to recognize that we have a choice on how deep we go into our foreign experiences. So deep culture is one theme. Another theme for me is simply engagement. That how can we engage with the world in such a way that it stimulates us rather than making us feel powerless or making us feel that problems are too big. So finding the entry point for engagement, to engage with the world, because I don't believe that a philosophy or a mindset is enough. What we need is to engage with the world as it is in all its complexity. And the third theme I would say is complexity, which is that simple solutions are not enough for a complex world. So understanding that not everything can be solved with simple cause and effect, that everything needs to be understood in context, and that our desire, if our engagement can lead us to dig into the complexity, to go deeper into the areas that we're interested in, then this is where we can start to make change, because we need engagement, we need to be looking at things in all their complexity to look deeper. So those are the three ideas I have.
Absolutely. Very interesting. And I'd like to ask you if you could share some insights into your forthcoming projects, perhaps a couple of projects that are very important to you and they're coming up or that you are working on. That would be, I believe, very interesting for our audience here, Global Citizenship Education Interview Series.
So the first one I've already mentioned, the Deep Culture podcast, which is an ongoing labor of love with a team of 6 other podcast members, and we have a member, one of the podcast team in India, in Turkey, in Switzerland, in the Netherlands, in Japan. And what we're trying to do with this podcast is look at how the brain and mind sciences can inform our intercultural understanding. So not just feel good about cultural difference, not just tell stories about cultural difference, but how can recent insights into the mind and the brain help us understand these issues. So this is one project that's ongoing. Another is I'm working on a research project where we are asking about the beliefs and attitudes of intercultural educators.
Very interesting.
And so, for example, we asked educators, which do you agree with? Ethnocentrism is learned and therefore it can be overcome with education, or ethnocentrism is natural part of how our mind works and therefore it can never be fully overcome. So what do you believe about ethnocentrism? So the purpose of this research is to kind of see what are some of the assumptions that people have in intercultural education, because depending on the assumptions you have, education takes you in very different directions.
Absolutely.
And so this research into the attitudes of intercultural educators is something I'm working on. And
this is an individual independent project or is funded by an entity?
This is being done through the Japan Intercultural Institute.
Okay.
Yeah. And then one other project is I'm currently writing a paper on the psychology of intercultural understanding. And this is to look at how recent insights into cognitive science, cultural neuroscience, cognitive psychology, how they can inform intercultural education. So one example is that there's a lot of research into bias. And bias is not simply prejudice. Prejudice and bias are two different things. From the perspective of cognitive function, bias is simply a natural way that our mind works. We naturally jump to conclusions. We naturally make quick judgments. We naturally have positive feelings towards those who are similar to us. We naturally resist things which seem alien. So the way that the mind works is full of these natural biases. So how can these kind of insights be included in intercultural education? This is one of the papers that I'm working on now. So lots of things to do. As you know, it's a big world, and so
very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So I want to tie together all this very interesting discussion that we are having today with a final question that perhaps brings in major themes and your conclusions on this discussion on intercultural education, the Japan Intercultural Institute, your Deep Culture podcast, your forthcoming projects. And the question, and this is the last question, is would you be able to provide a brief definition of global citizenship, global citizenship education, using 3 keywords and explain your choice of these words? I know this is challenging. Perhaps it touches upon the discussion, that the overall discussion we had, but let's try.
Well, I'm happy to do that. And so I would first say the 3 words for me are curiosity, engagement, and complexity. And you can maybe guess already what I will say about these words, that without curiosity, without a desire, you cannot make someone interested. So curiosity is needed to engage with the world, in all its complexity to make a positive difference. And so those are my 3 words.
All right, very interesting. Curiosity, engagement, and complexity. Very, very interesting. Well, thank you so much, Yusef, director of the Japan Intercultural Institute, host of the Deep Culture podcast, and widely published scholar. Thank you so much for this very important discussion.
Thank you so much, Emiliano. It's been a pleasure.